Okay, so what we'll do today is try to finish up this book if we're able to. I hope we can. Then at the end of the class, we'll talk about the exam, which will be next week, I think, at this time. And so we won't talk about the exam until the end of the period. And that's where we are. Okay? We left off last time with the baseball game. And Reuben gets hit in the head. We're dealing with what are known as what? Hasidim. Hasidim. What does that word mean in English, do you know? No. It actually in Hebrew means pious ones. For instance, they're led by usually this Rebbe character, which is a sort of vulgar way of saying rabbi, but from the Eastern European sort of colloquial language. But often the person who leads them is called a tzaddik. So they're Hasids, or Hasidim, or Hasids, what we're going to call that. And the leader is often called a tzaddik. What does the tzaddik mean? Righteous one. Righteous one. Someone who's righteous, totally righteous person. The Hebrew for righteous one. Hebrew and Arabic are basically constructed in the same way. They're both constructed on three-letter roots. For instance, the three-letter roots here would be, and the three-letter roots here would be, then if you want a noun, you put it in like that. And if you want someone who does something, you put it in like that. And you just change the way the vowels are formed and the way the letters could double or something like that. If you want a verb, it'll be a slightly different way the vowels are put in. Arabic is essential. So for instance, if you take a word like, since I'm ill today, I didn't want you guys to be deprived of this great class. I'll close this door. You would have been, I think, unhappy about that. Probably not, but in any case, take a word in Hebrew and Arabic. So in Hebrew it's, and in Arabic it's, pardon the squeak, it's this pen here. It's salam. So they're based on the same three-letter roots. So even in Islam, which is, as you immediately see, is a version of this. Take out this, take out this. That's a verbal noun meaning to make peace, or to cause to make peace, actually. In Arabic, it's called a fourth form verbal noun. We don't have a causative in English, but in Arabic and Hebrew, they have a causative verb. To force, to make someone do something. That's a fourth form causative verb. This is the verbal noun of the fourth form causative verb, Islam, which is to force or cause someone to make peace, so they call the name of the religion surrender. It's very much in the news today because that's non-Muslim. First of all, Muslims don't give up any conquered territory ever. They want everyone else to give up conquered territory, but they never give up conquered territory to anybody. And like the Pope just visited the mosque in Byzantium, but that was a Christian church. But there's no talk, for instance, I was reading an article in the Los Angeles Times on this issue by a Christian Arab, I think his name was Ibrahim or something. And he was saying, Yeah, look at the Pope. You couldn't even pray in that church, even though it used to be a church, Santa Sophia. Now it's a mosque and a museum. Because in Islam, you don't give up conquered territory, period. That's forced. Once an area is Islamicized, it has surrendered to Islam. So that's where you get this idea of the cause to make peace, to surrender to God, to Islam, to however you put it. So that's part of the situation in the world today that one is working on, and that comes right out of these verb forms here. So it's interesting to study the languages and get the actual verb forms. For instance, someone who has surrendered, you can maybe say you surrender to God, surrender your will to God, or surrender to the Muslim community, whichever. By the way, you know also there's no apostatism in Islam. Apostatism from Islam is punishable by death. Once you're in Islam, you can't leave it. Now, a lot of people don't realize that. A lot of young women I've met even on this campus who have come to me and asked me situations. I've met a young man who's Muslim background and they're going to go home to his country. I said, well, no one's going to probably do anything to you, but you know, once you're in Islam, that's it. You can't leave Islam. You can come to America and maybe leave it, but you can't leave it in the home country. Theoretically, there are less stringent and more stringent countries, but the more extreme countries, that is the way it is. So they've asked me, oh, I said, just be aware of what you're dealing with, because you're not dealing like in America. You just move around from religion to religion, no one bothers about it. You can't do that. It's part of, and this is something that's never advertised, of course, and I didn't mean to bring it up, but I'm talking how the language works, really, so that comes out. That was this article 3 days ago in the Los Angeles Times that made me think of this, because that was what the article was about. The guy was complaining about how the Pope was treated in Constantinople, that he couldn't pray in what had formerly been the most famous church in the Byzantine Empire. And people who want to grant minority rights in other countries have to be willing to grant minority rights in their own countries. So this is all part of the European Union's problem over the issue of the entrance of Turkey. Are they going to protect minority rights? Well, Islam does protect minority rights to an extent. But like all the churches that have been turned into mosques, are those going to go back to being churches? Of course not. It's never going to happen. And so on and so forth. So these are the issues that the Europeans are dealing with. I'm not saying one is right and one is wrong. I'm just saying these are the struggles. That's what this article was about. This person was a Christian, so he was protesting about that. I don't really. I have neither. There's a famous Arab proverb from the Arab poetry. It is, I have neither he camel or she camel in it. Meaning, I don't have anything in that particular discussion. So I don't have a position on it. In other words, I love to say that. People say, what are you talking about, Professor Eisenman? It's from a classical Arab poetry in one of the feuds that was of the various Bedouin tribes, and it was, I have neither he camel, or I'm sure in Arabic it would be more elegant, but in English it works out nice. I have neither he camel or she camel in it. In other words, I'm out of that particular debate. In any event, someone who does Islam, therefore, these languages is a Muslim. So you just add the prefix mu onto the SLM, put it in the same way, and you've got someone who practices Islam. And like Muhammad, that's a perfect example. Muhammad is somebody, mu means somebody who gives praise. Who gives praise. So, Hamad is, the root is to praise. So you can construct the Semitic languages like that. So let's go back to the Hebrew. It works the same. Arabic is a richer language than Hebrew because it was used orally more than Hebrew. Hebrew was frozen in a written form about maybe 8th century BC and didn't develop orally as much as Islam didn't go into writing, or rather, Arabic didn't go into writing until about the 7th century AD. So it had a much more rich development. So the vocabulary in Arabic is around 4 or 5 times the vocabulary in Hebrew. That happens in all oral languages. But anyway, Hasid is from the root HSD in Hebrew, meaning pious, piety. pious one. Josephus says, for instance, a famous Jewish historian in the 1st century, John the Baptist taught piety towards men, piety towards God, and righteousness towards men. And of course, if you know what that means in the classical situation, those are the 2 love commandments that are portrayed in the New Testament as the teaching of Jesus. So basically, piety towards God is loving God. Righteousness towards your fellow man or woman is loving your neighbor as yourself. Loving your fellow man. In other words, treating your neighbor the way you would want to be treated yourself. That's the definition of righteousness. So these things go way, way back to the 1st century and before, all these words. And that's why this is a very interesting modern, latter-day offshoot of those sort of concepts. And I mentioned before that some movie stars now are very interested in this kind of thing. And jazz, musical people, rock, I guess you'd call it. Madonna, as I mentioned, sees herself as the queen of Kabbalah. And I told you that when I encountered her, she said, well, Kabbalah is anything I say it is. I said, well, that's interesting. I didn't know that's what it was. But anyway, that's fine. Anyone can say whatever they want. And I'm glad that she likes to read all this stuff. That's so you say that's the underground mystical tradition. It's actually the same word in Arabic as Hebrew. In Arabic, to receive, kibel, look kibel, based on KBL, to receive, meaning we receive the tradition from the previous generation. That's a noun based on the verb KBL. In Arabic, it's the same word. KBL means to receive. So you can get lots of things like this. So you ask, how do these conceptions from the 17th century go all the way back to the time of Christ and before, through Kabbalah? Through Kabbalah. Some people might put a double B here. No, I don't know if that looks good. Maybe it's a double L. There's something missing here, but I can't see it.
It's double L.
Is it double L? Okay, double L. Something's missing. I can't see it very well from this perspective. So that's really how it happened. And then in the Middle Ages, a book of Kabbalah was written down called the Zohar. We have an instructor in our department who likes to teach the Zohar, meaning brilliant light. But that's a sort of weird sort of amalgam of Neoplatonism, Greek thinking, and mystic thought, and biblical interpretation and stuff. No one knows how it suddenly appeared in the 13th century. But then these groups in Eastern Europe cottoned on to it, and then they started their own mystical movements. And of course, a big word in those traditions was Hasid, piety. And that's where you get this word. Someone said Orthodox. Well, we have an Orthodox person in this story. Who's that? What? It's the narrator. What's his name? What? No, that's not the narrator.
Oh, Reuben.
Reuben Malter is the Orthodox person. And he's actually seems liberal. We would say him, if you look today, you know, he would observe all the practices of Orthodox Judaism. He would seem extremely orthodox to us, conservative, very traditional. But these Hasidim are even more way out, if you want to call it, than he is. So he looks upon them as weird. They're all in Judaism, supposedly. Someone said if you get, I don't know, 3 Jews in a room, you get 4 opinions. get 10 in a room, you get 13 opinions, or something like that. I mean, people think there's a Jewish plot or something to take over the world, all these silly, red herrings that you hear thrown around out of trying to work up dislike of people and so on. And shibboleths, they're sometimes called, because in the Bible, you know what a shibboleth was? It means, it's a funny word, shibboleth. I assume you read this book, so you don't need me to maybe get through the whole thing. I'm going to get through it at this rate. I hope I will. You see here, they knew that the surrounding peoples pronounced shith. So as a password in one of the books of the Bible, they gave the word shibboleth. So at night they would ask, what's the password? And shibboleth meant an ear of corn. And so if the person said sibboleth, they'd kill him, because they know he was from surrounding people who they were fighting against or whatever, or they would take him prisoner or whatever they would do. If he said shibboleth, they'd let him through. I don't know if you've seen the old movies, you know, when the American soldiers in World War II, they'd say, who was the pitcher for the New York Yankees in 1942 or something like that. And they would have the Germans or something like that, oh, I don't know. So then they would open fire. I don't know if you've seen those Hollywood movies where they always would ask that kind of thing. But yeah, so this is what they would do back in biblical times. And so the word came into the English vocabulary as a red herring, you know, a nonsense question. Well, as I was saying, I mean, Jews can't agree among themselves about anything. I think even less so than Muslims. So they don't agree, and they argue with each other. And it sounds like we're being buzzed or something. They argue with each other all the time. And in this book, you see, that's all they do is what? Argue with each other. They're all arguing with each other. So people who think they're unified and that they are all together and they all see things the same way, you just haven't experienced the world that this book is describing. And then it's not just these two groups who are arguing. There's Reform, who are even more liberal or liberated or assimilated than this fellow Reuben here. And then there's conservative people who are somewhere in the middle, and so on. And then there are people who don't have any religion at all among Jews. And they still are considered Jews and so on. Or consider themselves Jews, or others consider them Jews. I mean, Hitler didn't ask if you believed anything. He just asked who your mother and father were, or who your grandfather was, or someone, and off he went to the gas chambers, regardless of what the president of Iran thinks. You know. So there are also all those people. So there's a lot of differences of opinion. And this book is full of that kind of difference. But the main argument here is between Orthodox and Hasid. And so someone said Orthodox, he says not Orthodox, these Hasids. Now, Danny is a Hasid, right? But Danny is a very odd sort of Hasid, isn't he? Danny is not what you would expect. You know, mostly religious people, if you've met them or know anything about them, particularly this kind of background, they pray like this all the day. They're reading the Torah, they're reading the Talmud, they're studying. They're very good now because of this kind of training in computer stuff, which is why Israel has a huge Silicon Valley now, rivaling Silicon Valley up in Palo Alto area and all those places, because the religious training they got, like Muslims too, in the madrasas, where they basically read and study the Quran or the Bible or the Talmud and don't do anything else. And they're very similar, by the way they behave in those institutions. What did I say the name of the institution was in the Hebrew language? Yeshiva. The madrasa in Arabic would be yeshiva in Hebrew. And it's, again, very graphic because It's a place where people sit down. They sit all day and don't do anything but study. So it means to sit down. And that's what they do all day. And there are people like this still, although I would reckon that in this country, among Jews, it would be about 5% of Jews are like this. Maybe less, maybe 2%. In Israel, maybe 10%, if that. Yeah, 10% of that. My friend is agreeing with me. He sees it the way I do. He knows. He's been out there. He knows what the score is. There was an incredible movie recently, 2 nights ago. I couldn't believe it. That was on Sundance Channel. I just my eyes were glued to it, even though I didn't think it was. It was obviously put up job by some of the people that were in it, but it was really incredible. It showed it was an hour and a half on-the-spot documentary of the withdrawal from the Gaza settlements that just happened last spring. If you get a chance to see that on the Sundance Channel, you want to see Jews arguing with each other? Just turn that one on. You never saw so much arguing and disagreement and dislike of each other, and no unity whatsoever. So don't think that these people have unity or outlook. They don't at all. They disagree completely. And I've never met anyone who even agreed with me on anything. So, everyone has a conclusion. So, see that movie, I don't remember the name of it, but if you do see it on the Sundance Channel, you'll really get an eyeful of the arguments between the army, between the police, between the settlers, between the supporters of the settlers, between the people in the middle, between the government, because they all talk to the camera and they show where they're coming from, and it's really astonishing to see the emotion and ill will, in fact, towards each other. People of our background think, oh, the Jews are have ill will towards us. I'm not sure they have any more ill will towards you than they have towards each other. So there's a lot of upset. So the argument in this book, though, is just one little segment. Orthodox versus extreme Orthodox, Hasid. And if you've read the novel, I hope you have, because I can't read the whole novel for you, obviously it's too long. It's a good read, I think. Danny's father hates Reuben's father, doesn't he? I mean, he literally hates him, doesn't he? And why? They disagree over Israel. They disagree over Israel. So there's another, this is before Israel is even being formed. One thinks that the Messiah has to come in his own time, and that you can't rush it and you can't do anything to bring him about. Christians could get into that argument and discussion too. Not so much whether the Messiah is coming, but when he's going to return. For Christians, it's the return of the Messiah. But it's basically the same idea. Jesus is supposed to return according to most Christian thinking. So whether he's already come, that's not really what we're talking about. Come, not come. We're talking about, are you supposed to hurry it? Get the rapture moving faster. Get all your stores into your garage and get ready for the going to another dimension. With Danny and Reuben's father, it's whether you have a right to push things along yourself. And the second thing, of course, is that Israel, which hasn't even been founded yet at this moment, is to be a religious state. You see the same thing in the Muslim world today about their struggles over whether they're going to be secular or religious. So whether it's going to be a godly state, if you want to call it that, or it's just going to be a Western type state, a Western democracy. Obviously, Reuben's father is very enlightened. He's Orthodox, but he's very enlightened. And for him, will be tolerate all peoples, different parties, different shades of opinion. That would be normal for a Western parliamentary democracy. The thing that Bush thinks he's bringing to Iraq, but he's having a little trouble bringing it about in that kind of worldview that we know from east of Istanbul on all the way to the Himalayas. about any given nationality in that whole area there, for whether it's central Russia or the Iranian area or Pakistan or wherever, you know, there'll be different views on whether state should be secular or religious, the same as we're talking about in this book. And Danny's father, of course, only wants a religious state run totally by a messianic person, and nothing is going to be done until this happens. And in the meantime, where's Danny's father going to stay? In Brooklyn, New York. That's where he's going to stay, and he's going to be the big king or the big guy in Brooklyn, right? So, what happens to Danny in the end of the book? Just so in case we don't get there, I have had it all sorted out. Danny goes totally secular, doesn't he? So I say he's a different sort of person. You wouldn't expect such a person. He's supposed to succeed his father, you see. That's the whole point of the book. He's supposed to succeed his father, isn't he? His father's grooming him. And there's where the love comes in. All right, say, are these people love each other? Well, yeah, they do actually love each other. Yeah. His father loves him so much that he can't bear even to talk to him. And he has a rule of what in this book? Huh? Silence. He loves him so much that he doesn't even want to influence him. And you say, that's love? Well, for him it is. And he only starts talking to him when he leaves him, when he goes secular. In the meantime, what does he use Reuben for? I see you guys have really read this book. I mean, you're really into this book. Huh?
He uses him to learn about this.
To talk to his son. Yeah, he talks through Reuben to his son, doesn't he? He cultivates the relationship with Reuben because he knows that Danny likes Reuben or respects Reuben. And the two have become friends. They became friends. I thought they hated each other. The first chapter of this book, they hate each other, right? But we've got to get into the next chapters, and that's what we're going to do in a second. But the point here is that the conflict really comes to a head. You see, this starts in approximately when does this narrative start? How do we know what the year is here? 1944, why? Well, why? What's happening? Yeah, but what's happening? World War II is 5 years. No, that's not what's happening. What's happening? Normandy. Yeah, thanks a lot. Appreciate it. You read it. Well, how do we know he's in the hospital, right? They're listening in the hospital room. What are they listening to? The radio. The radio, the description of the Allied troops landing on Normandy. Hello, hello, June 1944, in case you didn't learn it in high school or secondary school. If you didn't learn it in high school or secondary school, go back and beat your teacher over the head, okay? They should have taught you that anyway. I think that would be a useful thing. If you didn't, you could have seen the Steven Spielberg movie, what was that called? Saving Private Ryan. You know, he had his own version of that, which was, you know, pretty fair movie, actually. What's going on there? It's like, is it Jingle Bells or what's happening? Okay, so let's go over. So we know it's 1944. So over time, they follow the Allied armies in the background in these little events that are going on in the book, right? So there's no break between Reuben and Danny at this point, is there? The point is that how do Reuben and Danny get to be friends? Danny's father, I think it's Danny's father, makes him go in and apologize to Reuben in the hospital for having broken his glasses and almost blinded him. And Danny comes into the hospital while Reuben's in bed, and how does Reuben treat Danny? He's just like, what? You know, he's just like, basically, you know, is very peeved at him, isn't he? What the hell are you doing here? Basically, he said, get the hell out of here. I don't want to talk to you. You did that on purpose. I know you did that on purpose. So in a way, he admires Danny, doesn't he? Because how could you think someone could hit you in the head with a baseball from a pitched ball on purpose if you didn't think this guy was Superman? You see, he does really, and you can see from the beginning of the first chapter, I don't have time to read the whole thing, Danny is a special kind of person. So he is the anointed one for his father. He is supposed to follow his father in his role as the charismatic leader of that community. There are several different Hasidic groups, 5 or 6 who escaped from Eastern Europe, came to Brooklyn, some went to Jerusalem. By the way, in Israel, if you've ever been there or go there, I'll ask you a rhetorical question here. Some of you will know the answer to this. Do the people in Israel like the Hasidim? No, they hate them. Say, what? How can the Jews in Israel hate the Hasidim? Because they don't serve in the army. They don't serve in the army. They don't bear their share of the struggle. You say, well, I'm a Muslim, I'm an Arab. The hell with all of them. I don't give a damn where they go. Okay, well, that you can have that attitude, but that isn't understanding your enemy, if you want to call it that, or your opponent, or whatever you see these people as. Whether you like or dislike them has nothing to do with understanding them. So whether you like or dislike a certain group or feel in conflict with them, you still have to understand what's making them tick. Why don't they like this group or that group? Well, because the Hasidim get a military deferment. I mean, even Druze, you know who Druze are? Druze are an Arab Shiite sect in the Lebanese mountains, in the Syrian mountains, and in northern Israel or Palestine. You say, well, they're Arabs, right? Yeah, but I don't want to be upsetting to anyone here. They don't really like the Arabs very much. The Druze and the Arabs fight a lot in Lebanon, Syria, and other places. They're all Arabs, but even the Arabs have, as we see in Iraq, serious splits among each other. Oh, the Druze serve in the Israeli army. The Druze want to serve in the Israeli army. So how can the Druze serve in the Israeli army and the Hasidim don't serve in the Israeli army? Well, this is some of the contradictions that you have there. The Druze leaders went to the Israeli government and said, oh, we want our young men trained in war. We want them to know how to fight, sort of like the Navajo in the American army, you know. The Navajo, you say, why should the Navajo fight for the Americans? Because they think that they're American and they want to, certainly they go to, most Navajo who go into the army often go into the Marines, the toughest part of the American. A lot of people do that. I know some Japanese friends of mine all volunteer for the U.S. Marines. There's a lot of people who feel that way. A lot of Hispanics feel that way too. But the Navajo go, and the Druze are very into quite serious fighting units and border police sort of units. Often when you see problems in the border police, it's the Druze that are involved in beating people up, because they're always in the border situations, at checkpoints and things like that. Anyway, I don't want to get into all that. But the point of the matter is that the Hasidim are very unpopular in Israel. And I just read something in the paper, I think it was today or yesterday, I was reading the paper, and it was about a law passed in Israel, I forget what it was, something about, oh yeah, stopping the Hasidim from making propaganda on the streets, like I think we in America stopped the Hare Krishnas from handing out propaganda in the airports, stopping the Hasidim from making propaganda on the streets, bothering people on the streets, handing out whatever they hand out, stuff like that. Yeah, there was just a law passed the other day against them in the parliament. So, which is, you're smiling because you know that could happen. It could, couldn't it? People feel that way.
They're annoying.
Huh?
They're annoying.
Yeah, well, unless you're one of them. Yeah, they can be annoying people who don't like them. And then people who like them, yeah.
What's the difference between the propaganda in the streets and the people that go door to door like soliciting?
Yeah, that kind of thing. Yeah, that's what I mean. That sort of, well, they can stop you on the street too. If you're walking on the street, they'll say, "Oh, let me wrap a tefillin on your arm." And a tefillin or tefillin is these things that they, when they pray, they put leather strapping around. I don't know if you've ever seen them around your arm, and they put a prayer box on their head and so on and so forth with a little passage from the Bible. And they want everyone to do that, don't they? So they'll stop you, and they'll, you know, and they might go to door or something, but more they stop you on the street. But I don't know, in America, I mean, Jehovah's Witness, all these people go door to door, Mormon people and others go door to door. I think in Israel they would be really upset by that if they started going door to door like that. They'd really get worked up. They're stopping them even from doing it on the street there, you know. Anyway, that's a good question. Anyway, so I just wanted to show you that, so that's not the only reason, but that, the other reason is they don't like them, is because those people, often, not all of them, some of them, not all of them, they're all split among them. The Hasidim are all split among themselves. And some of them, anyway, some of the most extreme of these extreme people, depending who their Rebbe is, who's a kind of Jesus figure for them, charismatic leader, miracle worker, and so on, messianic miracle worker, that's how Jesus portrayed in Scripture. They prefer to live under Arab rule. They would go, for instance, to Yasser Arafat and welcome him, because the reason they don't want to corrupt the world with an unjust Jewish rule. So they would prefer to live, they think all rule is unjust, but they would prefer to live with an unjust non-Jewish rule than an unjust Jewish rule, because they feel that that would be more hurtful to God and displeasing if that were to happen. So they prefer to be tolerated under an Islamic or Palestinian or other world like that. And so those groups in Israel are really hated. Not because of their attitude or what they think, it's the fact that they actually are looked upon almost like traitors. So anyway, so there is all that, and there's all that running through this book, isn't there? That's what the plot is here in this book. Because as 1944 goes into 1945, the American armies come into the concentration camps, and then the news of what they find in the concentration camps and so on begins to leak out. And whether you believe it or not, and I think it's pretty well documented, but I don't want to get into that argument, the enormity of the horror that occurred begins to seep home into the community here in Brooklyn. And so they're all going to religious schools in Brooklyn, but then different groups of people, particularly people like Reuben's father, are agitating for the setting up for the refugees and others, that the British government and others should finally allow a Jewish state in Palestine, which of course we now know is supposed to be the crux of all the problems in the Middle East. Whether it's the crux of all the problems in the Middle East, since we're a mixed class here, I don't really want to get into whether you think it is or it isn't the crux of all the problems in the Middle East. I have a feeling that even if the Israeli state weren't there, there'd be quite a few problems in the Middle East. So that's often, maybe that exacerbates the problem somewhat, and it also gives people a good cause célèbre to keep on getting excited and outraged over. So anyway, I don't want to get into the right or wrongness of that particular thing. This is a prose Zionist, to some extent, book, in the sense that the person who's writing this book, I think, really sympathizes with Reuben's father. And probably the person writing this book is a Reuben person. I think it's probably a Reuben person. It's probably, I would think this book really happened. I would think that the person who's the man writing this book was at one point Reuben. And he knew Danny. Hey, Danny. There's another continuation of this book that I don't think is half as good. Can't remember the name of it. So he knows more about Danny's life after he becomes a psychiatrist and stuff like that. So I think he continues this book somewhat. All right, so let's go here. They're in the hospital then. Hospital scene, let me see if it's chapter 2. We rode to Brooklyn Memorial Hospital. And Mr. Gallanter comes in. How you doing? Let's see, what page are we on in your book? I want to try to keep track of it, because my page is different. What page is chapter 2 for you?
32.
32, all right, I'm 4 pages ahead of you. So, you know, they have this jaunty discussion. The Saunders boy on the next page or so, Mr. Gallanter said, the one who hit you, you know anything about him? And they start talking about the whole thing. Doctor comes in, examines him, he's got some blurred vision, they want to call his father and so on. So I'm just going to try to move along here till something significant happens, okay? Guy called Dr. Schneidman comes in or something like that. They take him to the eye ward. They examined him. Then finally we get to a new section within chapter 2. I opened my right eye. I guess I've done an operation on it by that point. What page is that, around 36? I opened my right eye. In my book it's 40, some have my book.
38.
You're 38. You're catching up to me. Okay, so you're kind of probably past me, and some of us have 40 and some of us have 38. So then his father isn't here yet, but there's people in the other beds. It's in a ward. So he gets to know some of the people in the ward, and it's interesting. I think there are men playing cards. There was one boy who was blind. And let's see. What day is it? 41. It's Monday. Yeah, there it is. 45 in my book. 41 in your book. Monday, June 5th. Like my friend over here said. Monday, June 5th. Oh, he's gone now. But anyway, he said it. He's gone. Well, you know, and he knew when the invasion was, so I guess he can pass the test. That's right, kid. So there's some funny guys. A guy called Mr. Savo. They're kind of rough. What's your name then? Reuben Malter. Good to meet you, Bobby boy. Tony Savo's my name. That's right, Bobby boy. So he's getting this kind of, this kid has never even seen the world. And he's in this world full of rough people in the hospital. Finally, his father comes in, and of course, his father is a very kind, gentle person. They talk about the glass in his eye. Dr. Seidman took it out. They say he performed a miracle. He calls his father here Abba. Abba. If you know people, religious Jewish people who know some Hebrew, Abba means what in Hebrew?
Dad.
Father, yeah, Abba. I think it's in the New Testament too when Jesus says, "Why have you forsaken me? Father, Father, why have you forsaken me?" So Abba is actually, it's Aramaic, I think, but I think it also works. Aramaic is another Semitic language. It's in the middle of Arabic and Hebrew. So anyway, they have a very warming discussion. And then on page 48, my page 50, hey, we're moving, huh? The dad says, Reb Sanders called me twice today, once last night. And that's the dad telling the boy. So the boy, what, who? Reb Sanders. Why would he call you? Yes, he was wanting to know how you were. See, they're all friends at this point. So as I told you, as the background here we see is June 5th. It's going to be June 6th in a moment. I think June 6th is D-Day, isn't it? If I'm not mistaken. So all this is kind of symbolic, you see, in a way. As it moves on, they don't have a problem with each other. But then when they hear about what happened in Europe and so on, you get into 1946, 1947, and so on. Then you get in the agitation and seeing the great, you know, situation following the war and the Palestine-Israel, well, it isn't Israel yet, the Palestine struggle and the UN debates and stuff like that. Danny's father, or rather Reuben's father, is identified by Danny's father as one of the people that he doesn't like what he represents. So not only does, by that time Danny and Reuben have become friends. So not only does Danny's father not speak to his own son ever, I think what happened, one of the things that's so tragic for the father is he finally tells, I think, Reuben, that when he was young, he lost his brother back in Poland or Europe where he was, his older brother, who was supposed to have his position also at that time. And it was so, what happened, I don't know, he was either killed or he disappeared or something, I can't remember the whole plot there. So this was so awful for him that he, you know, he cares so much for Danny that he can't speak to him. When Danny goes to dinner, when Reuben goes to dinner at Danny's house, Danny's father likes to trick him, doesn't he? What kind of thing does he do when tricking him? How does he trick him?
Are you talking about when he was supposed to tell him?
He likes to ask him trick questions, doesn't he? To see how well he knows the Talmud, right? So I think in, he's not, Danny of course knows everything, so there's no tricks. You see, Danny is Superman. You ever been in a situation like that in school? Whether high school or grade school or whatever, where there's some people who can do everything who are perfect. I'm not sure how they finally come out in life, some of these people who are perfect when they're young. But there are people who are just, if it's a camp or a kindergarten or a junior high, you know, there's always one or two people who are just perfect. They're smart as can be, they're wonderful athletes, they're beautiful, everyone looks up to them, everyone admires them, they're just like perfection. It can only be when you're a child that such people exist, because when you grow up, everyone's messed up and screwed up. And, there's no perfect people anymore. They're all beat up to the head by the world, right? So it's only when you're young like that that you can have these perfect people, right? So, so it's only when you're absolutely young that you can have perfect people like that. I guess seeing some of you guys here for the first time. You guys all in this class here? You guys all where have you all been, huh? You guys sure you're in the right class? I mean, a lot of people are coming in here saying, I never saw you before. This is the last day or something. All right, maybe you bring your friends in here for entertainment. That's a good laugh. Huh? Anyway. So these perfect people, you only exist, but they do exist, don't they? They do exist. How many have met with these perfect people when they were young? Come on, admit it. You've met some of these people. I can think of 3 or 4 when I was young in different environments. These people are just like breathtaking. Now you see them when they're grown up and they're like, have had heart attacks and they're like walking on canes. And, you know. The world has a way of paying them back for being so perfect when they're young. You were stuttering, you know, blundering, you know, non-entity, you know. So anyway, Danny is that. Anyway, Danny is this kind of. So Danny, you can't trick Danny into a question, can you? You can. But Danny's father wants to see how smart Reuben is. So in one of these scenes, we'll get to it. When they start getting friends, and he talks through Reuben, and he, you know, wants to see if he can use Reuben to communicate with his son. He can't use someone within the sect, obviously. That would be beneath his dignity. But if he can get someone like Reuben outside of his sect that Danny trusts, then he can communicate better with his son, and that's what happens here. But you see, as I was saying, he says, Danny's father called me several times, 48 yearbook, 50 mine. He wanted to know how you were. And then what's Reuben's attitude? He said, yeah, I'll bet he did. Yeah, right. Sure he did. And then he talks about, he worries about his dad, though, because his dad lives alone, I think. They have a housekeeper. I think the mom died, and his dad has got physical problems of different kinds. He's not that healthy. So he says, you're not taking care of yourself, Abba, even though he's in bed. I'm worried about my baseball player, the dad says. And Reuben says, I hate that Danny Sanders for this. He's making you sick. So he doesn't even hate him for himself. He hates him for what he's doing. He sees him as doing to his father. But what's the real truth here between, that's what makes this a really interesting, complex novel. What's the real truth here between Reuben, so anyone can get into this book. You see, you don't have to be a Hasid, you don't have to really care about all these issues, but slowly the book pulls you in. Which is why I say most people in my classes, when I've read this book and who have really seriously read it, not like some of you guys are reading it, but actually took the time to read it, read a book. Oh, no, you don't need to read a book. Yeah, read the book. They actually end up liking the book and really enjoying it. And you would never think you could enjoy a book like this subject matter, could you? But you're shaking your head, yes, you obviously read it yourself. You get pulled into it. You can't help it. It's so human, isn't it? It's really human. Given its parameters, even however different it seems to you, it's totally human. And this is probably one of the most appropriate books for this class in terms of diversity of religion. So I've asked, I don't have time in this class to ask in a moment, but I've asked which were the students' favorite books, and this one always comes out almost on top, which is really weird because there are very few Jewish people in the classes. And it doesn't matter what your background is. Whatever your ethnic background is, people seem to really relate to this. Hispanic, Asian American, and so on, Protestant, Catholic, whatever. People seem to really can see this relationship of complex things. So what's really happening? Well, it turns out that Reuben's father has met Danny, hasn't he? Where's he met Danny? In the library. Because Reuben's father goes to the library a lot. He likes to study. He's a very intellectual, sort of library-oriented person. Not a Jewish library, the Brooklyn Public Library. Well, it turns out little old precocious Danny is also going to the British, to the Brooklyn Public Library, or even the New York Library, it might be. It's not a religious library, the sect library or whatever. It's the actual secular library. He's reading books. And Reuben's father sees him there, and he knows who he is, and then somehow they get into conversation because he knows who Danny's father is, an important person in his little community. And one thing leads to another, and Reuben's father starts recommending books to Danny. And Reuben doesn't know this. And when he finally discovered it, he's really a little bit angry about that, isn't he? That his father never told him that he had a secret relationship with this Danny and was coaching him intellectually. In fact, it's probably Reuben's father's fault to some extent that Danny leaves Hasidism and goes to college at Columbia University across the river in Manhattan to study what? Psychology. Because what did Reuben's father recommend Danny read? Freud. He recommended Sigmund. Huh?
He did on his own.
Did he find it on his own with it? I thought he recommended it to him. Anyway, we'll see. But you're sure he found it on his own, huh? Well, what was he recommending to him then? Something.
Yeah, he recommended Freud, but Freud wasn't one of them.
Freud wasn't one of them. Okay, but I defer to you because you've read it more recently than me. Okay. Anyone want to join in on this between him and me? Did Reuben's father recommend Freud, or did Danny find it on his own?
He recommended psychology books, but it wasn't Freud. He found that on his
Okay, he recommended psychology books. Well, if you're going to recommend psychology books, you're going to find Freud, obviously. Are there any other psychology books? I mean, there are a few, but I guess that's what I thought. So forgive me for my mistake. But you're more precise than me. I'll let you. I'll give that. So we have these two people, and here's where that word apicorism comes in. Yeah, I hate that Danny guy. And then he says, he deliberately aimed at me, Abba. He hit me deliberately. Age 48, 49, I think. And Reuben's father says, what he hit you deliberately? Come on. Get real. Are you kidding? He didn't hit you deliberately. You should see how he hits. You know, he's got total respect for him. He almost killed another guy. He said his team would kill us apicorism. His father said, what? Apicorism? What are you talking about? They turned the game into a game of war. I don't understand. On the telephone, Rep Sanders said his son was sorry. Sorry. Oh, Benny's sorry. He's sorry he didn't kill me altogether. It's pretty good dialogue. A lot of fun. You see, it's quite real. My father gazed at me intently as I saw that look of amazement slowly leaving his face. I don't like you to talk that way. You know, his dad is very, you know, he's full of rectitude. You know, he's very straight and everything. He doesn't, you know, he blames his own son for his efforts too. Not just, oh, if your father was there, he'd say, oh, I gotta get that bastard. I'm gonna go after him with a baseball bat, I'm sure. But no, that's not what Reuben's father is gonna do. Reuben said, no, I don't like to hear you talk that way. That's not right what you're saying. You know, you have to be fair even though it happened, you know. Father's down the line straight. And he's impressed that Danny wants to say he's sorry. It's true, Abba. Did you ask him if he was deliberate? No. How can you say something like that if you're not sure? That's a terrible thing to say. He was controlling his anger, as Dad was. It seemed to me to be deliberate. Things are always what they seem to be, Reuben. His dad's being sarcastic. Yeah, that's a reason. Since when? I don't want to hear you say that again about Rep Sanders' son. Oh, yes, Alvin. Now I brought you this, and so on and so forth. And he brought the newspapers and a package and a portable radio. And I guess it was a portable radio. You see, the Allies were also advancing on Rome at this time. Rome, they took Rome after the Anzio beachhead, if you know the history of the Second World War, just around the time of the landing in Normandy. And you see, they only expect Rome is going to fall. There's rumors of an invasion, and so on and so forth. And the radio is a real big thing. So, okay, that's what happens there between them. I also brought you a few pages along here. Your tefillin and prayer book. I told you the tefillin is the phylacteries. The phylacteries. The phylacteries that, that's the wrong pen, isn't it? I'll try this one, huh? You laugh. I think it's funny too. I don't think I'm going to get through this book the way I'm going. I got to speed up, you guys. I got to speed up. Okay, forgive me. I want to get through this book if I can with you. That's on what page? 52 or so? 51. It's on my page 53. Okay. So even he does phylacteries, and I'm sure if you meet any Jewish people, you've probably never even seen a phylactery if you're not in their world. And that's because about, I would say, 80% of Jewish people, 80% of Jewish people, or 85% of Jewish people, I think, don't use phylacteries. But back in the old days in the ghetto, they all did. So that's the Nazis, for instance, would see them all like that, with the little prayer box on their head and the leather banner on their arm. Would you agree about 85% of Jews don't use phylacteries?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
And they always say, you know, put on the tefillin, it's the most holy thing you can do.
Right, but nobody does it, do they? No, nobody does it. So, Mom, what are you talking about? What are you have to know more about the situation. It's quite interesting. Some of you, like, you're taking modern Jewish thought Zionism class, aren't you? Where's this young lady who's taking that class? You're taking it anyway, huh? So we cover a lot of that stuff in that class, so you know that it's pretty wide distribution, isn't it? Wide distribution. Okay, chapter 3. heard this shout. Well, what's happened? They're taking places, talking about places called Can and Carrington. That's really great, Can and Carrington. How many saw that series on HBO? What's it called, that series? What's it called? Band of Brothers. Band of Brothers. It traces 101st Airborne Unit. Yeah. And what's the battle they're in? Carrington. Yeah, they're in Carrington. That's one of the real battles you see in that. And how many saw that HBO Band of Brothers? You did. Hey, us three, we're the only ones that care about the world, it looks like. What is it? Is it only Britney Spears and all these drips? I mean, what's the name of her? How many husbands has she been to now? I mean, what was his name? Kevin Federer or somebody like that? What was the other guy, the one before that who was in the Bobbsey Twins? Oh no, I'm pardon me, the Disney song group. What? What was his name?
Justin Timberlake.
Oh, Justin Timberlake. Really important people. Really important people. Much more important. What did he say? What did he say?
He's bringing sexy back.
I don't know much. Or how about that other drug addict, the one who's the little 17-year-old girl who's constantly going to, you know, what's her name, the new one, Lindsay Lohan? See, you guys all know who these people are. Okay, I do too, but you don't know Karen Trump. That's what I object to. Okay, I don't mind you knowing Lindsay Dopo. But the least you can do is also know Karen Tom, you think, like, isn't that right? Brave men died there, didn't they? Brave men died, really, very many. And you pay your respects to them. They're the ones who allow you to appreciate Justin Timberhead or whatever his name is, Lindsay Loudmouth. Okay, I'm kidding around. I don't have much respect for these folks. You forgive me. They're not. I mean, I'm sure they're sexy. So he said something about British Airborne Division seizing Bridgehead and 2 American Airborne Divisions, and Mr. Savo was sitting on one of the beds, and this is a big deal, you know. This is really big for them. It's the invasion of Europe, Mr. Savo. It's D-Day, Bobby boy. We're clomping or something like that. He says it's rubbed out in my book. May I pray? I want to wait with your phylacteries. Blah 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 blah. So he goes on and he prays with his phylacteries and this and that. And Mr. Savo is going on, and the correspondent was saying excited that some German torpedo boats had attacked the Norwegian explorer. It's really exciting, you know. If you were living through this at that time, you were in the hospital, you'd never forget it. You'd never forget it. That's really big stuff. And one of the hurt people says, I guess it's the coach comes in or something, he says, "That's good news, Trooper." He calls him Trooper. "This is some day. One of the greatest days in history. Fantastic." Well, okay, it is a pretty big day, you know, the invasion of Europe and so on, but I gotta say that the Russians fought some much bigger battles than this. Don't get a lot of credit, but if you really want to get into World War II, you take a look at Stalingrad sometime, you know, where you have hundreds of thousands of people pitted against each other, or the Battle of Kursk. Battle of Kursk is one of my, you know, I'm a buff for this kind of stuff. It's one of my favorite battles. I don't mean favorite, but I like it. There you have, like, literally, you know, tank battles in 1943, I think it is. I guess it's Kursk, maybe it's a QUTU, maybe like that. And it's probably QKU, where they got tank battles of like literally 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 tanks on either side, and armies in the hundreds of thousands going at each other for 3 or 4 days on end without, you know, just beating the living daylights out of each other. Those are where World War II was really won. By the time they landed in Normandy, the Germans didn't have a heck of a lot left, frankly. So I mean, the Americans with the British did a pretty good job, but the Russians had already swung the balance. I honestly believe. I'm no great admirer of Russia, but you have to give them credit for what they went through. I mean, they lost 20 million people in World War II. 20 million people. So those were struggles on a monumental level. So I'm just sort of saying the greatest day in history. Well, not quite the greatest day in history, but a really big day for America. I mean, bad day for the Germans in Western Europe. Probably have to land more than 150,000 troops today and tomorrow. What page is that? 658, 59? 60 in my book. Landing 100,000, one of the greatest days in history. What page is that?
59.
59, okay. So we're getting about the same here. So what's going to happen when all this talk and so on? In walks Mr. Hotshot, page 61. Hello, Danny Sanders said something. I'm sorry if I woke you. The nurse told me it was all right to wait here. I looked up at him in amazement. He was the last person in the world I expected to visit me in the hospital. Before you tell me how much you hate me, he said, let me tell you that I'm sorry about what happened. I don't hate you, I managed to say. He smiled sadly. Can I sit down? I've been standing here about 15 minutes. I thought it looked a little like the pictures I'd seen of Abraham Lincoln before he grew his beard. I called your father last night, so he gets some inkling that he knows his father. And then Danny, Reuben isn't very nice. He says, how does it feel to know you've made someone blind in one eye? And he looked at me expressionless. What do you want me to say? The voice wasn't angry, it was sad. You want me to say I'm miserable? Okay, I'm miserable. That's all, only miserable? How do you sleep nights? So, you know, it's, I mean, let's face it, Reuben is a bit of a square. So then his father comes in later and says, you did a foolish thing, Reuben. He's very stern with him. This is around page 64. So. You remember what the Talmud's father always quoted the Talmud says? The person comes to apologize for hurting you, you must listen and forgive him. I couldn't help it, Baba. But what I tried to tell you, Reuben, is that when a person comes to talk to you, you should be patient and listen. Now, we will not talk anymore about Reb Sanders. It's the beginning of the end for Hitler and the madmen. Okay, so that's what's going on in that chapter. So Danny comes again towards a little further along. They start to get friendly. You're a pretty rough fielder and pitcher, he said, smiling at me a little. He grinned at me. I have an agreement with my father. I study my quota of Talmud every day, and he doesn't care what I do the rest of the time. What's your quota of Talmud? 2 blot. 2 blot, around 68 this is. I stared at him. That's 4 pages a day. If I did 1 page a day, I would be happy. Don't you have to do English? Oh, of course I do, but not too much. We don't have too much English work at our yeshiva. Everybody has to do 2 blot of Talmud a day. Not everybody, only me. My father wants it that way anyway. So he tells them something about his relationship. And he tells them about how, he says, I have a photographic mind, he tells them. He recited about 1/3 of a page of the Talmud. Well, the Talmud is a book, or a series of books. It's not, Talmud means to study again. LMD is to study. So it's a word based on studying. It's studying the Bible, or what they call the Torah. Torah really just means scroll, roll. Now it's come to mean law, but they studied the Torah, which is the Moses, first 5 books of Moses, the law, because it was written on a scroll, it came to be called the Torah. And the Talmud then is commentaries on this, an oral tradition of the great rabbis from around the 2nd and 1st century BC to the 1st century AD, around the time of Christ, or Christianity, or whatever it is born. And then the Talmud really looks like this. you have this like this here like this, which is all written in Hebrew. And then around it is this all written like this. So, and this is written sometimes in Aramaic, sometimes in Hebrew or whatever. So it's a book within a book. This part was compiled around the 2nd century AD, and this part was done around the 2nd to the 6th century AD. So it's the commentaries on this thing, which in itself is a kind of commentary on the Bible. So it's a commentary on a commentary on a commentary. And it's about 30 volumes. Is that right? More or less, something like that. I thought you were telling him something on that particular subject. It's about 30 volumes in a normal book type length. So to read it, you have to know Hebrew, you have to know Aramaic. So if you're a little kid, you have to learn all this when you're 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. And then you start, so for a little kid to do 4 pages is a big deal. And he doesn't just do 4 pages. What does he do? He memorizes 4 pages. He memorizes 4 pages a day. He pleases his father. But, he says, you know, he's kind of funny. You know, I'm like a genius or something. He's not very. If you saw the movie, there's a movie of this book which is really good. Robbie Benson plays Danny. I don't know who plays the little jerky guy. But the movie is pretty accurate in terms of getting his character right. He said, I have a photographic mind. And so Reuben's impressed. He said, I'm impressed. You know, I'm sure I'm going to take my father's place. And then Reuben says he wants to be a rabbi too. What do you want to be a rabbi for? Danny asked Reuben. There's so many other things you could do. That's funny that you should talk like that. You're going to be a rabbi. I don't have a choice, Danny says. It's an inherited position. I have to do it. I don't have any choice. I'm the successor to my father. You're free. You mean you wouldn't be a rabbi if you had a choice? No, I don't think so, he said. What would you be? Probably a psychologist. A psychologist? You want to be a psychologist? Yeah, actually. Is that like Freud, psychoanalysis, and things like that? Yes, he said. I didn't know much all about psychoanalysis. And Danny Sanders, in his Hasidic clothes, seemed to me to be about the last person in the world who would qualify to be an analyst. And how about you, Danny asked, if you weren't going to be a rabbi? Oh, a mathematician, something like that. So they have this kind of talk. Look, they talk about, my father sends him along, one of the teachers who's waiting outside, I think, for him, to make sure we don't mix too much with the apocorism. You're an apocorism. That apocorism thing really got me angry, Reuben said. This is the last page before the end of chapter 2. So on and so forth. Then he tells them at the very end of the chapter, my father doesn't write, Danny said. He reads a lot, but he never writes. He says words distort what a person really feels in his heart. He doesn't like to talk too much either. Oh, he talks plenty when we're studying, but otherwise he doesn't say much. He told me once he wished everyone could talk in silence. Talk in silence? I don't understand it either, Danny said. Anyway, he begins to tell him that his father doesn't talk to him. He doesn't tell him exactly. Then Danny's, I think Reuben's father finally tells him. So that's the end of chapter 3. So let's see if we can pick up some good things, because I really got to hurry on along here. If you see in the next chapter here, I think they're very precocious, these kids, probably more than you guys. They're reading Huxley, Darwin. They're reading Hemingway, Farewell to Arms. You guys are at college. You probably haven't even read a lot of those books yourself. So these people they're pretty into intellectual learning. Then he goes on to tell him more about not having a choice here. I have no choice, he said again. I'm on page 81 of my book. I don't know, it's towards the end of chapter 4, I guess, right before book 2. It's like a dynasty. The son doesn't take the father's place. If the son doesn't take the father's place, the dynasty falls apart. I'm a little trapped. So I told you about that. It's really funny, you know. I have to be a rabbi and don't want to be one, and you don't have to be one, and you want to be one. What a crazy world that is. So they've really got to be good friends, and you see, it's a funny thing, you see. Talking about symbolic logic, baseball. So then it's at the end of this chapter here, I guess Danny's father comes in and introduces him, pardon me, Reuben's father comes in and